Welcome, everybody. I know that I have some alums from previous classes, some committees that I've been on at Ross or at the university. I'd like to say it's so nice to see you, but I can't see you, so I'll say it's so nice to have you here. Let me give you, for those who don't know me, and for those who do know me, there's some updates on what I've been up to. I'm going to start just by introducing myself. And then we're going to jump right in. This will not take more than an hour. I don't, as people who've been in my classes know, I don't like just talking, but I'm going to be doing a bit of that. But I'll also include a poll. You're going to watch a short video. I have some stories of people who've been successful. So stay with it and let's get started. So Paula Caproni from the Ross School of Business. I have been here since 1989, which is crazy, as you can imagine. It feels like it went by in a minute so far. And what I do is primarily I teach in the MBA programs, full-time, part-time, core courses, electives. I also teach the core for the Master of Management. I do a lot of executive education, both in the US and abroad, outside the US, a lot in Asia, a lot in the Middle East, a little bit in Europe. I've done some in Latin America. I love it all. I've traveled quite a bit. And those of you who've had classes with me know this line that I've said. It's a quote from the late Mr. Morita, co-founder of Sony. And he said that for all his travels around the world, the most important thing he's learned is that people are 95% the same and 5% different. And that's the spirit with which I present this material, that this should be useful regardless of where you're from, your nationality, race, gender, the kind of job you're in, the kind of family you came from. You know, one of the reasons I have a book called The Science of Success. It's on Amazon. I have a Coursera course on the science of success that now has over 50,000 people who have attended, and it just keeps going, growing and growing. And the reason I did this, and I'm broadcasting it for free on Coursera, you can take it, the longer version on Coursera, is that many people don't get this at home. Now, one of the things when I teach in the MBAs or executive or Master of Management, one kind of diversity that's in the room that no one ever talks about is that some people in that room, you know, they come from highly educated parents. Maybe they don't have to take out school loans. They're the third or fourth generation going to college. In that same classroom, there are people who are first generation college students. And many people, maybe even in my case, I'm first generation high school. My parents didn't graduate high school, immigrants, right? Italian, Polish immigrants. My grandmother didn't get past third grade in Italy. And so my motivation for doing this was, I've been very lucky. I've had a great career. I still am in my career. But I realized many people, including me, never got information at home about networking, what it takes to succeed, what kind of skills you need to develop, what kind of mindset. So in many ways, this program, the Coursera course, the book, what I'm doing here, it's a gift. I'm paying it forward. Because the wonderful thing about being Michigan, I mean, many wonderful things about being in Michigan, is that we have resource to all this research, all these wonderful people. So I'm sharing it with you. So what you'll see, we're going to start up now. I'm going to go into a poll in a minute. You see a bus. Many people have been on bus tours when they go visit a country. You get on the bus, you go around the city for about an hour or two, then you get off the bus. This is pretty much your bus tour of the science of success. You're getting the highlights. We'll be on the bus and off the bus in less than an hour, but you can learn more. You know, you can learn more by the Coursera course. You can email me. You know, there are ways to learn more about it, but here's your bus tour. So here is your first quiz, a poll. And if you've taken my course before, you know the answer to this. How much of your professional success is predicted by your intelligence quotient, your IQ, how well you do on intelligence tests, your GMAT scores, your college entrance scores, how well you do on exams. So I'm going to ask you in 20 seconds, do you think it's 75 to 100%? Do you think it's 50 to 74%, 25 to 49, or below 25? So let's see if I can get this poll running. If not, Sherry has promised to help me. Let's see. Oops, go back one. You ready? So I'm going to launch the poll. I'll give you about 10 seconds, not long, just your gut reaction, and then I'll tell you how the poll turned out, and I'll give you the answer. There you go. Well, okay, here we go. In polling, share the results. Many of you have taken my class before because the answer is below 25%. And some of you just know that instinctively. The reason why is that success in life requires so much more. Requires so much more than how well you do on tests. The world is ambiguous. The world, we have skills that we need beyond analytical skills. Analytical skills are central, they're critical, but they're insufficient. I mean, think about now, as I do this, we're in the middle of a pandemic, our lives have changed tremendously, most of us. Your IQ is gonna help you maybe a bit, but not a lot right now. There are a lot of other skills you need to have: resilience, creativity, your social, your relationships, your ability to learn quickly, your ability to adapt. Life is like that. It's not like a test, right? And this is based on the research of Robert Sternberg, one of the world's most renowned social psychologists who studies the relationship between IQ and professional success. And we're defining professional success as promotions, salaries, having flexibility to change careers, keeping your job. And of course, some of this is luck. I never want anyone to think that, gee, even if I do all the right things, you can do all the right things and things may not turn out as planned, as you had hoped. But if you do all the right things to the best of your ability, it increases the possibility, the probability that you will achieve the kind of success that you want in life. And I don't define success for you at all. For some people, it's becoming a senior leader. It could be an entrepreneur, your own company. It could be working part-time. It could be getting off the track, getting back on the track later. Okay, so you define, this is about how you achieve your own success as you define it. All right, another quiz here coming up. 2 simple questions, and I don't have a poll, just answer these in your head. When you see someone doing particularly well at someone, person who does a great presentation, or a musician, or someone who is just a really great leader, they lead teams, project manager, all of these things that some people do just really, really well. Think about if you have children, maybe they're really good in art, or reading, or something, engineering. When you see someone doing something well, including your children, if you have them, do you ever say things like, he's a natural people person, or she's a born leader, or math just comes easily to her? So answer to yourself, yes or no. And be honest with yourself. What do you say to yourself? Number 2, you have been asked to take on a challenging new task, and you have to learn a new skill. Maybe it's presenting to the president and board of the university, coding and analyzing data. Maybe it's time to go to the gym and you have to learn how to lift weights and stay motivated to do that. How much of your ability to learn these new skills will depend on natural talent versus hard work and persistence. They certainly both matter. Just in your mind, put it somewhere on this continuum. Okay, a new skill, presentation, coding, physical fitness. How much is natural talent? How much is hard work? In this session, we're going to answer this question. So here are the characteristics that predict success. I call them GEMS because it's the growth mindset, it's expertise, an expertise that matters to you, that you care about, and someone will pay for, right? Because we're talking about jobs and careers. So growth mindset, expertise, self-motivation, and social capital, which means relationships, the resources you get from your relationships. That's what social capital is. We'll start with growth mindset. And you'll see that's where the last two questions, that's where we're leading. Some people have more of a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset, think about how you answer those questions, means you say things, people with a fixed mindset say things like, he's a natural communicator. I'm a natural at math. Leaders are born and not made. A fixed mindset may have a little bit of truth to it, but when people have a fixed mindset, they believe in nature over nurture. They believe people are born with a fixed amount of intelligence or talents or your personality. You might say, I'm not a people person. And that this personality, these characteristics stay stable over time, and it becomes part of your identity as a person. There's a problem with that because people with a fixed mindset tend to, and this is based on a lot of research, primarily Carol Dweck, I think she's at Stanford now, Carol Dweck and a lot of her colleagues, and they've done this work globally, not just in the US, and that should matter to you, it matters to me. So people with a fixed mindset are more likely to look for opportunities where they can show their strengths. They like being good at what they do. They don't like not being good at something, anything that would expose their weaknesses. When they make a mistake, they are more likely to say, you know, it's just not my genes. It's just not something I'm good at. So they avoid taking risks. And if they don't think they can get better because they're not genetically predisposed to be a people person or a math person, they're more likely to quit when something gets really hard. On the other hand, people with a growth mindset are more likely to achieve success. They say things like, leaders are made, not born. I can do it if I put my mind to it. She worked hard to get to where she is today. They believe in nurturing your talents through really hard work, right? That your talents, your personality, it's largely learned. It may be somewhat genetically, you know, some people are shyer than others, but that may be, I don't know, predicts 20% of your behavior, but not 100%. And they believe that effort and learning predict success. It is not. So think about this. When someone says to you, or when you say to someone, oh my gosh, you're so good at that, you're a natural, that is, it's meant to be a compliment. So our social skills says, accept it. It's a beautiful tribute to you. And it's a beautiful tribute you're giving to the others. But it really isn't a compliment because it doesn't take into the account the years of hard work and practice that they've done to get that good, to look like they're a natural, right? So keep that in mind. With a growth mindset, you want to say things like, how did you learn that? How long did it take to develop that skill? What advice would you give me? I tend, you know, if you want to be someone who goes into a room and works the crowd smoothly and look like a natural and know what to say, you would say to someone, how did you learn to do that? You're so good. They'll say, well, I read books, I got advice, I practiced. There's a story about I heard about a guy who felt very uncomfortable trying to get a conference, going to a conference and working in a room. And what he did was he said every time he went into a new conference, he said to himself, I'm going to talk to everyone wearing blue or red. And he just gave himself a goal, and that helped him practice. I thought that was a good story. And so with a growth mindset, if you have a growth mindset, think of you, your children, people you manage, your colleagues, nieces, nephews. They look for opportunities to learn new skills. They're more likely to take a risk because they're not afraid of looking bad. They think that making mistakes are just part of learning. And that's why you need your network too. You need to have people around you who understand your learning and who will support you while you make your mistakes. And they'll look for negative feedback. They're not always looking for compliments. They're saying, how could I do better? What would you have done differently? What could I do differently next time? And they're resilient because they don't get crushed when something goes badly, right? Or I should rephrase that and say they don't get crushed for long. We're all human. You know, even people with a growth mindset, it's not like it feels good to make mistakes, particularly in front of others, but they move on faster. They fix them and they move on. So people with a growth mindset, they live in a world of not yet. And this comes from a story by Carol Dweck, the researcher, who tells another story about a teacher in, I think it was in the Chicago school system. It was a school where the kids had a rough time of it. Didn't have a lot of resources, didn't have a lot of support. They sometimes went to school hungry. And when she would give a test or a quiz, when she handed it back to the students, instead of giving a fail for the students who failed, and a lot of them failed, they didn't have the support. So instead of giving a fail, she would write on the paper, not yet, which leaves, I mean, as you can tell, just an entirely different message. Keep trying, you're not there yet. All right, so that's a growth mindset. We're leaving the growth mindset now, and we're going into expertise. And again, expertise is something that matters to you. And since we're talking about careers, not hobbies here, that people will pay for. You know, you want to be known as an expert in your field. So this is Yo-Yo Ma, the cellist. If you want to be known as an expert in your field, in your small area of the world, place in the world, people who are experts achieve the highest level of performance in their fields. And usually other people know it. When somebody needs a job done, they're going to say, let's call you, let's call Paula, let's call Don, let's call Mary, Maria, let's call someone, Lee, okay? Because they know that person tends to consistently do well. Not all the time. No one does well all the time, but they tend to do well more so than others. And the more they practice, the better they get, right? So that's an expert. People become experts, again, not genetically by genetic predispositions, not by natural talent, it's they practice. This is Misty Copeland, the ballet dancer. It's not only the quantity of practice, it's how they practice. Experts become experts through something called mindful, deliberate practice. And an example would be Sully Sullenberger. Those of you may remember, I think it's over 10 years now, or close to 10 years, when the plane went up in New York, right, New York airport, it goes up in the air within 3 minutes, probably less time than it's going to take for me to tell this story. 3 minutes. The plane goes up in the air, birds fly into the engines stall. Sullenberger and his co-pilot have to make a decision very quickly on what to do. And within those 3 minutes from the time the birds strike, he lands the plane, and you can see it in the water here, lands the plane successfully, and everybody survives with a few injuries. And he is wonderful when he tells his story because he does attribute it somewhat to luck. He knows he's talented. He knows he spent years developing this talent. His degree in graduate school was the psychology of cockpit crews during a crisis. He volunteered to be on those committees where they study plane crashes. So when that moment came, he was as ready as he could be. At the same time, he said he had a great co-pilot. He knew he could do his job because the attendants in the, in back, right, with the people on the plane, that he knew they were in good hands. He could hear them doing and saying the right things, so he could focus. And he said he was lucky. If this was in January, if this had happened, if it was a sunny day, it happened during the time of day when there were other boats around that could come help him, rescue the people. He said, if this happened in the middle of the night, 3 nights before, it was snowing. No one would have been around. So he's smart enough to know that as hard as he worked, he is also, in that moment, was a lucky man. and he gave a lot of credit to the other people on the plane. He was invited to the Obama inauguration, and he wouldn't go unless all the attendants could go, and unless his co-pilot could go. And there's a picture of all of them there at the inauguration. So I think that's a wonderful tribute to him as a man, not take all the credit. But expert performers, mindful, deliberate practice means they are focused on what matters. They try not to get too distracted. Mindful practice means they practice over and over and over again, the little things, even when they're boring, right? When many of us would quit, they just keep going and practicing over and over. So it's not only quantity, it's quality. If a student, so for some of you taking this program, if you really, really want to apply it and make it pay off, this is an hour of your time. Or for your children, you're going to go back and say, what am I going to do differently? What is the skill that I want to develop? And I am just going to focus on it over and over and over again. If you take this program and then get back to work, which is also fine, I'm hoping it's entertaining and you enjoy it and you learn something, it will not be as helpful as it would be to you as if you actually applied it immediately to something that matters to you. They use multiple resources, books, internet classes, workshops. One thing I'm hoping to start doing myself, don't know how to do it, I'm at stage 0, is data visualization. So I just signed up for a Coursera course out of Michigan State on data visualization. And ideally I'll be able to translate this research better for others. But I'm not gonna be able to do that unless I stay focused on this class and practice. They build in instant feedback. They know how they're doing all the time. They know they're not always gonna do well, so the failures build in. They have a stretch goal so that they fail a certain percentage of the time. And they tend to have a coach, particularly early on. Someone could be a peer coach, doesn't have to be someone you pay. Someone who gives them advice and keeps them focused. Chris Rock, the comedian, brilliant comedian. You may or may not like his humor. It's pretty raw humor, but he is top of his game, right? He is an actor, he's a comedian, he's won, I think, Emmys, he's won multiple awards. And when you see him, you think, wow, he's a natural comedian. He looks so at ease, things are coming off the top of his head, but that's not true. When he was back over 10 years ago, you know, if you're from the US, if you're not from the US, if you're from the US, you know that on New Year's Eve in New York, there's the big dropping of the ball at midnight. And they have a host come in, they have singers, dancers, it's a big deal. So Mr. Rock was asked to be the host, right, of the New Year's Eve ball dropping, I think in 2007, I don't know, 2006. But what they said is before, even though he had been doing this for many, many years, he practiced for many months before the New Year's Eve ball drop, that event. He would go to little clubs, nightclubs, and he would practice the routine that he was going to do on New Year's Eve. And then when people laughed, he kept it. When they didn't, he tossed it out. Go to the next bar, practice, and he kept doing it over and over and over again, one bar at a time, figuring out, practicing what would be the best routine for the audience on New Year's Eve. You know, so even the best people who are at the top of their game, they do not stop practicing. Okay, so we're leaving expertise. We're moving on to self-motivation. Two things we're going to look at. One is conscientiousness, the other is grit. So next slide. And I'm going to show you a little 10-minute video here, so you're going to get a break from me. Now, if you click on it, Sherry, you'll see a little circle goes around that little boy. Go back one. That little boy, please. Thank you. We're going back to the little boy.
I clicked on him.
So that little boy, I'm just going to ask you for like 10 seconds. Do you know who he is? This is the Beijing Olympics. Many years ago. He's carrying the flag at the opening to the Olympics. The reason he was chosen to carry the flag, do you see that little patch of that white on his head? That little patch of hair that's missing? This was shortly after a major earthquake in China. Many, many people died. It happened during the day. Parents were at work or at home. Kids were at school. He was at school with his classmates. Buildings are falling down. Schools are falling down. He dashes out of his school and he gets outside, and then he goes running back in to get some of his classmates, drags them out. Afterwards, somebody asked him, "Why did you do that? You were safe." And he straightens his little back and he said, "Because I am the hall monitor and that's my." And I think that's just, to me, that's the best example of conscientiousness. People who are conscientious, and I think you can go to the next slide, Sherry, at this point. They do, basically, people who are conscientious do their jobs. They do what they're supposed to do. They set their goals, they achieve them, they're reliable, you can count on them, you don't have to motivate them. Because they're self-motivated, they work hard, they tend to be organized, planful, they tend to be careful. They tend to be rule followers, and you can see that can also be a problem, but they have a strong sense of duty and integrity. And I have 2 daughters, and one of the main things, I mean, when I had them, I didn't yet have all this research, it was more that but I knew I was raised, even though my parents didn't finish high school, I was raised to do my job to the best of my ability, right? My kids were raised to do their jobs, and they're now working and they're doing really well, you know, and part of it is you can count on them. I want kids you can count on. So the downside of, one downside, just to point it out, where it says careful, unconventional, conscientiousness is, by researchers, seen to be the biggest predictor of success, which is great, and that's what they found. It's not the only thing, but a significant predictor of success. A couple downsides: if you are conscientious but you don't have social skills, you could end up being a micromanager, you could end up being really annoying, right? If you are too careful, you may not take risks. And in order to change organizations, in order to move your career, you just have to take some risks. So conscientiousness, one of the most significant predictors of success in life, plus social skills, plus the willingness to take calculated risks. It's pretty golden. You know, you still got luck out there, good and bad luck, but it's pretty golden. It also predicts, conscientiousness also predicts longevity. Next slide, please, Sherry. Because conscientious people, they're more likely to eat healthy, exercise, they wear their seatbelts, you know, they attend their doctor's appointments, they take their medications, they do safe hobbies, they're less likely to smoke. It would be interesting now, and I'm saying this in a non-judgy way, I know people have a lot of different opinions, but if you took a poll, or if there were scientists standing outside a mall or something now, not in Michigan, but in some places, yeah, people are starting to go out, and who's wearing a mask and who isn't, right? Who's following the social distancing and who isn't? So I'm saying this not being judgy, but it would be interesting to see if someone were quickly being able to assess people on conscientiousness. The research would suggest that you're more likely to wear the mask and do the social distancing. You're a rule follower, and there are rules right now, right? You're more likely to be conscientious. So I hadn't thought of that until I showed these slides in this context today. All right, next slide, please. I'm going to set up a little video. It's 10 minutes. This is Angela Duckworth. You can be conscientious, which means you're doing your job. If I come to you and say, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Great if you're conscientious. You probably have a really secure job to the best, best we can be. No jobs are 100% secure. Grit means you have a long-term goal you want to achieve. You're not just focused on your current job, but grit means passion and persistence toward a single long-term goal. Something that will take hard work, something that means stretching, something that means probably failing sometimes, but you don't quit. So on the next slide, I'm going to have Sherry. It's just a 10-minute short TED Talk. It's Angela Duckworth, and she gets most credit for studying grit, but there are, I would say at this point, hundreds of researchers who do. But she does a good explanation. So Sherry, Thank you. 10 minutes at most. I can't hear it. I don't know if others can. Here we go.
When I was 27 years old, I left a very demanding job in management consulting for a job that was even more demanding, teaching. I went to teach 7th graders math in the New York City public schools. And like any teacher, I made quizzes and tests, I gave out homework assignments. When the work came back, I calculated grades. What struck me was that IQ was not the only difference between my best and my worst students. Some of my strongest performers did not have stratospheric IQ scores. Some of my smartest kids weren't doing so well. And that got me thinking, the kinds of things you need to learn in 7th grade math, sure, they're hard. Ratios, decimals, the area of a parallelogram, but these concepts are not impossible. And I was firmly convinced that every one of my students could learn the material if they worked hard and long enough. After several more years of teaching, I came to the conclusion that what we need in education is a much better understanding of students and learning from a motivational perspective, from a psychological perspective. In education, the one thing we know how to measure best is IQ. But what if doing well in school and in life depends on much more than your ability to learn quickly and easily? So I left the classroom and I went to graduate school to become a psychologist. I started studying kids and adults in all kinds of super challenging settings. And in every study, my question was, who is successful here and why? My research team and I went to West Point Military Academy. We tried to predict which cadets would stay in military training and which would drop out. We went to the National Spelling Bee and tried to predict which children would advance farthest in competition. We studied rookie teachers working in really tough neighborhoods, asking which teachers are still going to be here in teaching by the end of the school year. And of those, who will be the most effective at improving learning outcomes for their students? We partnered with private companies asking which of these salespeople is going to keep their jobs and who's going to earn the most money. In all those very different contexts, one characteristic emerged as a significant predictor of success. And it wasn't social intelligence, it wasn't good looks, physical health, and it wasn't IQ. It was grit. Grit is passion and perseverance for very long-term goals. Grit is having stamina. Grit is sticking with your future, day in, day out, not just for the week, not just for the month, but for years, and working really hard to make that future a reality. Grit is living life like it's a marathon, not a sprint. A few years ago, I started studying grit in the Chicago public schools. I asked thousands of high school juniors to take grit questionnaires, and then waited around more than a year to see who would graduate. Turns out that grittier kids were significantly more likely to graduate, even when I matched them on every characteristic I could measure. Things like family income, standardized achievement test scores, even how safe kids felt when they were at school. So it's not just at West Point or the National Spelling Bee that grit matters, it's also in school, especially for kids at risk for dropping out. To me, the most shocking thing about grit is how little we know, how little science knows about building it. Every day, parents and teachers ask me, how do I build grit in kids? What do I do to teach kids a solid work ethic? How do I keep them motivated for the long run? The honest answer is, I don't know. What I do know is that talent doesn't make you gritty. Our data show very clearly that there are many talented individuals who simply do not follow through on their commitments. In fact, in our data, grit is usually unrelated or even inversely related to measures of talent. So far, the best idea I've heard about building grit in kids is something called growth mindset. This is an idea developed at Stanford University by Carol Dweck, and it is the belief that the ability to learn is not fixed, that it can change with your effort. Dr. Dweck has shown that when kids read and learn about the brain and how it changes and grows in response to challenge, they're much more likely to persevere when they fail, because they don't believe that failure is a permanent condition. So growth mindset is a great idea for building grit, but we need more. And that's where I'm going to end my remarks, because that's where we are. That's the work that stands before us. We need to take our best ideas, our strongest intuitions, and we need to test them. We need to measure whether we've been successful, and we have to be willing to fail, to be wrong, to start over again with lessons learned. In other words, we need to be gritty about getting our kids grittier. Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry. Thank you. Yeah, with the, a couple points before we can go back one, just because I don't want people to read ahead yet. Yeah, thank you. A couple points here. One is that if you want more information, you know, since this was done by Angela Duckworth, she has a website where there's a lot more information on grit, probably also has the original assessment on grit. So that's one thing. The other, I'm going to tell, okay, now we'll go to the next slide. I'll explain it after the next slide. So the next slide, you know, it's of Will Smith, actor, comedian. This is just a quote from him from a magazine he was interviewed in. And he just says, the only thing that I see that is distinctly different about me is I'm not afraid to die on a treadmill. I will not be outworked, period. You might have more talent than me. You might be smarter than me. You might be sexier than me. You might be all of those things. But if we get on the treadmill together, there's two things. You're getting off first or I'm going to die. It's really that simple. And again, that just reinforces not natural talent, but how hard Will Smith worked to be, you know, to become the Will Smith we see, you know, on the screen. And he looks like a natural. But here's where there's a caution. The caution is there's also there's some research on the importance for you, for me, Will Smith, for anyone, to be able to detach from unattainable goals, right? Because if you keep going for something that for some reason or another, in his case, it was attainable. You know, his hard work, he made his trade-offs. There are many things he didn't do in his life, so he could do this. But you may be in a position, or sometimes I may be, where you want something, you put everything into it, and you realize it's not going to happen. And it's an opportunity cost, right? All the energy you're putting into something to be gritty about, you're not putting into other things. So you're paying a big price for this. You want to make sure it's worth it and that it will be attainable, right? If you keep putting the work into it. People who are, some researchers found people who were able to detach from unattainable goals ended up being happier and healthier. They were able to do better at the other goals that they chose. So you can become gritty then about something else. But my point here is I would never, ever recommend that someone kill themselves or get sick or lose their families or become so narrow, to become gritty and to attain one goal, all right? So it takes grittiness, but you want to keep that in perspective. Don't kill yourself or anything. That's what I would say. Next slide, Sherry. And the last one I'll talk about, and if I can answer some questions at the end for people who want to stay, is social capital. Social capital refers to the resources that you get, right, from your network. Okay? Because once you know, if you are known and you are liked, and if you're somebody who gives to others, people love to help you out. You're giving and getting help from other people, and that's central to your success. An example would be, next slide, Sherry, would be, well, there's different kinds of social capital. One is financial capital. You need money, right? Organizations need money. Next one would be your physical capital, your buildings, buildings and equipment. Digital capital, which we are all developing now. If we haven't had it yet, we have no choice. And many of us are starting to think, and I'm one of them, this is really cool to teach online. How can I get better at this? And what are the different resources? So digital capital, huge competitive advantage now. Human capital, and so I'm going to talk about human capital for about 30 seconds. You'll see in this picture, human capital refers to the individual, me, Paula Caproni, you, right? The skills, talents, resources, network that you bring to the organization. It's you as an individual, what you bring. Social capital, the last one, it's the handshake, or in some countries, it's not a handshake, it's a bow. In some countries, it's a kiss on each cheek. But it is the resources that flow from person to person. With social capital, you can get better results in less time using fewer resources. Instead of trying to figure something out on your own, you just shoot someone an email, or you go on LinkedIn, right? And you ask somebody, and because they know you or they like you, or you know somebody in common, they say, oh yeah, I've done that before. Here's how you do it. It helps organizations do better, right? It's a competitive advantage for you as an individual and for organizations. The next slide, okay, we'll go to the next slide. This is one of the, Google knows. Google is hiring from the same pool of people as Microsoft, as Apple. I mean, they're people who are, they're hiring the same smart people who do, with really good analytical skills. But Google knows that their competitive advantage is not just what's in people's heads. It's not just the smarts. It's in the relationships. So in this dining room, as an example, it is designed. Google, it's a lunchroom. So Google, if they want to, they can probably figure out, what do you eat on Monday? We're gonna have a drone deliver it to your office. You never have to talk to anyone else, right? You don't have to go to the dining room, right? But people go, they encourage people to go to the dining room. And when they go to the dining room, you'll see that the tables are really close together. And that's because with this person, say I've got someone behind me, I move my seat back to get out of my chair, or I want to get into my chair, I have to say to the person behind me, oh, excuse me. It forces me to look at someone else behind me and interact. And then I might say, oh, it's you. Or, oh, I see someone repeatedly, I finally feel like I know you just because I've literally bumped into you in the cafeteria. So Sherry, I think there's a little, excuse me, hey, it's you. On the other side, you'll see long line, okay? And it's Google. If they want to serve you in 10 seconds, they can serve you in 10 seconds. But instead, they've got a people analytics department that has figured out that if people stand in line, and I don't know the exact amount of time, but let's say it's 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. After 2 minutes, they're going to turn around to the person behind them and say, hey, long line, eh? Again, it forces that interaction, and it makes people familiar with each other so that they talk to each other. They exchange the information they know. They get to know each other's names, right? And they get things, that's what helps Google get things done better and faster. They see social capital as their competitive advantage, okay? Next slide, and this is my last slide. So science of success, the things that you want to focus on are the growth mindset, expertise that you're interested in, that it's worth being gritty about, expertise and that someone will pay for, self-motivation, conscientiousness and grit, and social skills, GEMS. But the other is, when we talk about success, it's not all about you. It's not all about me. And I love this quote from Melinda Gates. If you are successful, it's because somewhere, sometimes, someone gave you a life or an idea that started you in the right direction. And I'm sure many of you are sitting there. If you take a minute and close your eyes, you know who those people are, and you're forever grateful to them. She says, remember also that you are indebted to life until you help some less fortunate person, just as you were helped. And so it's a wonderful way to end this module with a pay it forward message and say, look, success really isn't all about you. It's about what we do for each other as well. That's what I have. And we don't have a way of really interacting. Before you do this, what Sherry wants you to do is they are collecting information. Am I, Sherry, going to be able to get some questions on the chat?
Yes, you will.
Okay, so if I go up, I can manage this. I'm going to see if there's any, if you have a question, and if I can't, Sherry can read. Oh, here it is down here. Wow, there's 24 comments. Great tour bus version, thank you. Okay, here's a question. How much does it matter that people know about someone in order for that person to be an expert? Yeah, I think you need, one of the things that you need to do is figure out how do you get your brand out there? And you can go online now and just look for, you can look for brand you. I know Professor Ellen Kosick at Purdue has a book on, I think it's called CEO of You. It's basically, yeah, you have a personal brand. And one way to have a good brand, because you can have a bad brand too. You don't want the bad brand. And frankly, most people already have a brand. The question is it the one you want? So you need to figure out and do some research on how do you create a personal brand. Now, do you have a website? Are you writing? You can write and publish a blog. You know, you can go on committees. Now, in committees often, you know, sometimes they're good, sometimes not, but people get to know you there. And when you go, you want to be, you're a piano player, be a player. Be engaged, show up on time. All those things matter. So yes, it absolutely, you want to have a brand. Okay, I hope that helped. All right, Prabhu, you are my former student. Thank you. How do you find out conscientiousness during the hiring process? One thing I would say to you for anything that we've talked about here, if you're interested, I would Google conscientiousness in hiring. It would probably, for me, I would look at, you know, give me an example of something that was really, really hard to do and you figured it out. That would be conscientiousness and grit. You know, what is a skill you wanted to learn? How did you learn it? I would start there, but I would do same thing I'm going to recommend you do. I would look up conscientiousness, you know, identifying conscientiousness in hiring. I imagine there's a lot on that because it's common knowledge among researchers and people in organizations who, you know, study the research or look at the research, that conscientiousness matters. Next question from Kenneth. How do successful organizations encourage conscientiousness and grit? I think it's me. This is where people who've taken my courses before, I think it's very much how you design the organizations that hold people accountable. You have to give people what they need to succeed, right? Clear goals, clear performance metrics. And if you're not holding people accountable, you know, you're not teaching them how to be conscientious. Maybe some people come into the organization with conscientiousness, not maybe, certainly a lot of people do. But if people are slacking off, that has to do with leadership and how organizations are designed. You know, I have a friend who has a family, a mother who's 97, who is in, you know, an assisted living facility. And sometimes the staff they're just not, it's a great place. So mostly it's wonderful, but sometimes things don't get done. And sometimes he'll say to me like, you know, it's just, you know, the pool of people that you're picking from. And I'll always say, no, it's not the pool of people. Some people there are great. It has to do with holding people accountable, having a good design. People know what they need to do to succeed. Clear goals, clear performance measures, the equipment they need to do their jobs, and then holding people accountable for it. So I think that's it. It's in the design of the work and it's holding people accountable to that work. People who are truly conscientious and truly who've developed it, I'm not saying this as something natural, who've developed conscientiousness, they're going to be, they hold themselves accountable to it. And I would talk about it. You know, tell people you're more likely to get promoted here. People here who do well tend to, they do their job. They're dependable and reliable. Anybody else?
Paula, there's some questions under the Q&A.
Oh, let me see. Q&A. What is going to change this year with exclamation point? I missed something here. Q&A, all I have is if you want to say, someone just says, that's going to change this year, exclamation point. Can you talk about remote connectedness? How does that affect social capital nowadays? Really great. These are all great questions, but that one, we are all dealing with that. How do you build relationships? And many people are using Zoom or the phone or Blue Jeans, Google Hangouts. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not someone to pretend to know an answer. I will say that is something we're going to learn a lot about. I'm sure it was more theoretical what was out there already. I mean, we do know that it's better to meet face to face at least once if you can. We can't do that now, you know, and then start the team meetings. We're teaching classes where we've never met the students face to face at this point. You know, I'm not meeting you face to face at this point. Some of you I know. Maybe you feel this as way. I do feel personally right now, I am reaching out to people I haven't stayed in touch with for a long time. I just haven't made the room in my life. And I am reconnecting to people. I'm enjoying Zoom, maybe 2 or 3 hours a day. More than that, I do find it exhausting, as you may as well. Or maybe some of you have tips for how not to get exhausted after 2 or 3 hours on Zoom. We're learning a lot. Let's see. Oh, here's one. Does race in class impact the opportunities for success? Absolutely. And that is in my book. I do talk about it. I didn't talk about it here, but it has to do with resources. You know, if some people, and we're so full of biases, you know, in terms of success, there is so much research that if you take 2 resumes, right, and you put the names on them, and one name sounds like a name from a particular culture, say like one culture, say Letitia, the other one is Elizabeth. Elizabeth gets more callbacks. That research is pretty clear, not 100% more, but one of the things they do is they now say, if you really want to be unbiased, don't show names on resumes because people are biased. The other, for people who are musicians, they learned this years ago that you have more women now who are in orchestras, because before, years ago, it used to be that people were just biased. The people who were selecting people for the orchestras were biased toward the men. And then they started having just the music behind a screen. If someone was wearing heels, they would take it out. They'd have that person come back later without heels, so you don't hear click, 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 click. All you could hear was the music. And you had to make the decision based on the music, not stereotypes. So yes, the one piece would be, in terms of race and class, is stereotypes, right? And you do have to work harder if you're a minority of any kind. You know, in different countries have different groups that are minorities. You do have to work harder. You have to work harder in the social, figure out in the social skill area. How do you make people comfortable with you? The world shouldn't be like that. But Akio Morita was really good at doing that, the late co-founder of Sony. He was really good. He said, in order for Sony to be successful, people from the West have to be comfortable with me as a Japanese guy, right? And it's important to him as his strategy was to make people, his financial strategy to make people comfortable. And class is resources. I wrote this book. I did this Coursera course. I'm doing this because many people don't sit around the dining room table at night talking about what makes people successful, right? And you kind of have an advantage if people say, hey, let me have Uncle so-and-so or Aunt so-and-so give you an internship this summer. You can put that on the resume. You don't put Uncle or Aunt so-and-so gave you that internship. It just says you had it. So yes, there are advantages. But there's a wonderful book. I don't know the name of it now. I don't know how sure if I can send it to you. It just came out about African Americans and leadership. It just came out. So we're looking at race and African Americans, but it is, I didn't know you were going to ask that. It came out in the past year, and it's a series of essays. And I haven't read the whole thing, but the pieces I read are wonderful. It has a Michigan connection as well. I can send that out. If we have a list of the people in the emails, I'm happy to send that out to you. Or Renee, if somebody wants it, email me at pcaproni@umich.edu. I will get it to you. Okay? It just came out. All right. So we have, but goals are changing because of recent COVID-19. It all gets disrupted. We shall come up with own goals. I don't really know. I don't really know what that question's asking. A lot of us have to change our goals. There's some goals maybe unattainable right now. We need to shift. And so this notion of being adaptable, your IQ may not help you as much as you'd like it to in this one. Adaptability will be, resilience will be, your social network is going to matter a lot. Yeah, there are definitely things are changing. And there are going to be opportunities we didn't have. I think it's really hard. My heart goes out. I'm still here. I have my job still. I am grateful every second of every day. My kids still have their jobs. Thank you, conscientiousness. But that could change anytime, and they're young. It would matter a lot to them if it did. And people don't have, a lot of people we know don't have their jobs. That things didn't turn out. We have students and invested all this money, and through no fault of their own, through no fault of people there, maybe losing jobs that they had. Learning, knowing how to bounce back, and sometimes it's writing it out, having the resources, money in the bank to ride things out. But then that's related to class too. So, for next, Lizzie, do we have other questions under question and answer, or do we do it? It's actually okay. One more here, and then people, please feel, our guests here. I have it that it's 11. Feel free to leave, but if you want to hang out, I'm happy to hang out. Given all of our conscientious and unconscious biases, what's the best way to bring it to a network that doesn't look like you or what you're used to? Mine would be, that's where you're doing committees. One thing we do know is that being likable matters. But if you're likable and you're conscientious, those two things, and I realize bias influences whether people think you're likable or conscientious, but you can only control yourself. Opportunities to connect. That means committees, that means in an elevator. And I do this. Some of you run into me in the elevator. I'll say, oh, hi, I don't think we've seen each other before. I'm Paula Caproni. I'm with them. How about you? Find opportunities, small ways to connect. And just repeatedly. When something comes up at an opportunity, your name's more likely to come up. Right? So it's just little opportunities, or a friend of a friend it's showing up. And into things that don't need invitation, because sometimes, because of bias, you don't get the invitation. And sometimes you have to ask. You say, I would love to be on this committee. I would love this opportunity. And people, because of their bias or they just didn't know, say like, oh, sure, I'll put you on it. And then you really show up there. Good? Are you hearing these?
Yes.
Oh, good. Because I know, yeah, I want to make sure you're hearing them. Does anyone, and again, for people, I realize for people who are signing off, it was great to know you were there. Some of you I know are alums of classes I taught. Some of you are new. I hope it pays off. And let me know if you have any questions or if you want additional resources. Just email me, pcaproni@umich.edu. I'm happy to be helpful. For those of us who are staying, another one question, given all of our conscious and unconscious bias. Oh, we already have that one. So is there, do you have any advice on how to determine which goals are unattainable and which just require more grit or hard work to achieve? It's a great question because, sometimes you just get exhausted and need I'd be looking at opportunity costs. I'd make myself a nice decision matrix that has what are the criteria I have for my life, or my choices that I'm making. What are the different options? I would be pretty systematic, but sometimes we're just tired and we need a break. We just can't do it for a while. And I think I'd be just very conscious of what I'm doing. Do I want to put it on the back burner for a little while? Or maybe life changed around me. I had resources for a while that could support, and now I don't. There's not a straight answer. There's not a straight answer to that. What comes to mind for me, is this a temporary break from something that's really feels unattainable and you're just overwhelmed? Do you need more help? Or are you getting the message that it's not worth it? And one thing I tell people, and I feel it in my heart of hearts, I do it for me. You know, my career, even though I've been here, has changed many times in the 30 years I've been at Ross. Things I've chosen to do, opportunities I've wanted, didn't get, those I didn't want, I did get, and those I wanted and I got, have had them all. But what I tell people is figure out in life, not so much the specific goal, because that can change. Life just changed for a lot of us here. Things are, for a lot of us, it's not going to be what we plan. But figure out, what is your contribution? What do you want to contribute to the school? Because there are hundreds of ways to do that. So you don't really give up on your contribution. You may give up and switch. Give up is not the right word, but you may switch to a better way of making that contribution. And then you don't feel bad about letting it go. There's a better way to make that contribution. I feel very strongly about contribution rather than just goals. Goals come and go. Contribution is near and dear to your heart, and it matters a lot to the world. Anything else here? Let's see if I have any others.
Paula, I can bring a few people in if you want. If anybody's interested in speaking with you directly, I can certainly, if they'd raise their hand.
Sure, let me answer. I have a thank you. And then someone said, can you teach grit? Yes, you can teach grit. And I would go for you, because it'd be a long response here. There's so much research on that. I would go to Angela Duckworth, Ducworth. You can teach grit. You can teach about the growth mindset. And they kind of go hand in hand. You can teach conscientiousness, but I go to her website. Schools use it to teach grit. So I think that's it for my questions here. If anyone else has, can you recommend any resources for speaking up to combat bias at the time it is occurring? Again, there are so many. Anybody who's interested in the bias, if it has to do with race, email me. This book is just, and I've only read pieces of it. It came by my desk and I thought I'm going to get to read it. I haven't read it yet. It's new, but it's the latest and greatest research-based, real people talking about success in real jobs, confronting bias at the time it's occurring. It's, email me and I'll get you the book reference, okay? I think that'll be your best resource. So for the question and answers, I'm gonna get off of this now, but if anybody wants to just join in and talk, zoom in on your face, I'm happy to extend this conversation a bit. And I'll say goodbye to everyone who's gonna sign off.